In the next few minutes, you're going to uncover a truth so unsettling, so fiercely buried by mainstream psychology, it could rewrite everything you believe about female desire. This isn't another shallow theory or pop culture explanation. This is the forbidden chapter, one even Freud hesitated to speak aloud, a truth hidden in private letters, silenced by his followers, and distorted by those too afraid to face its consequences. By the end of this series, you'll realize desire is not what you've been told. Men have been systematically misled, and once you see this for what it is, you'll hold a kind of power so disruptive, so raw, that most people will deny it even exists. Let's begin with a story Freud never wanted the world to know. The year is 1895, Vienna. A young aristocratic woman named Anna von Lieben, wealthy, cultured, refined, comes to Freud with a problem. She came to him trembling. Anna von Lieben, a woman of wealth and breeding, was consumed by unexplainable fits, bouts of paralysis, and violent emotional storms. She loathed her husband. She felt trapped in a life that suffocated her soul, and no amount of civility or status could mask the chaos simmering beneath her composed exterior. Freud, still a young and ambitious neurologist, began peeling back the layers of her psyche. What he uncovered would haunt him for the rest of his life. Anna didn't simply want, she craved. With a force that defied the polite narratives of Victorian womanhood, she confessed to fantasies of domination, humiliation, even violence. Not as shameful secrets, but as visceral truths. And perhaps most unsettling of all, they weren't aberrations. Freud saw the pattern. They were not the exception. They were the rule. In a private letter he wrote, "The civilized woman is a facade. Beneath it lies a chaos of primal impulses, a hunger that dares not speak its name. This wasn't guesswork. It wasn't moral panic. It was clinical observation, quietly documented, violently denied." And it gets darker. Enter Dora, arguably Freud's most controversial patient. Just 18, brilliant and emotionally volatile, Dora was sent to Freud by her father after accusing a family friend of sexual assault. But Freud's notes hinted at something far more disturbing beneath the surface. Dora was not purely repulsed by the man's advances. She was aroused. Her hysteria wasn't a reaction to trauma in the way society wanted to define it. It was frustration, rage, obsession. She didn't hate the man because he pursued her. She hated him because he stopped. He desired her, then withdrew, and in that withdrawal, something ignited. Freud named it the eroticization of refusal. A strange and disquieting phenomenon where rejection intensifies longing, where the denial of satisfaction becomes the very thing that fuels obsession, where the absence becomes more intoxicating than the touch. This wasn't theory, this was the shadow side of desire, and it defied every norm polite society clung to. Now, pause and reflect on modern dating. How many men today have been told that persistence is harassment, that no always means no, end of discussion. In theory, that sounds noble, but history, and Freud's own research, suggest something more complicated. In fact, they suggest the opposite. From Cleopatra, who masterfully seduced Julius Caesar through strategic resistance, to the medieval troubadours who sang tortured songs for untouchable noblewomen, one truth emerges again and again. Desire thrives in tension. It breathes in the gap between wanting and withholding. It lives on the edge of denial. Yet today's sanitized narrative, built around enthusiastic consent and logical compatibility, completely ignores this brutal psychological truth. Arousal is not rational. Desire is not democratic, and the female psyche, Freud argued, is drawn more to conquest than to convenience. Now here's where the story becomes explosive. Freud's most vilified theory, the one that got his works banned, burned, and dismissed, wasn't about sexuality in the way his critics framed it. It was about power, He called it penis envy, but the term has been grotesquely misunderstood. It was never about anatomy, it was about agency. Freud wasn't suggesting that women wanted a male body. He was saying that women, shaped by patriarchal structures, were taught to receive pleasure, not seize it, to wait, not to act, to be chosen, not to choose. Their desire was conditioned to flow through masculine pursuit, through dominance, intensity, even overwhelm. This, he claimed, is why the most independent women still fantasize about submission, why billionaire romance novels, dripping in power dynamics, dominate the female literary market, why the rise of feminine empowerment in society has paradoxically coincided with an explosion in BDSM culture. Still skeptical, jump to 1953. Alfred Kinsey, the father of modern sexology, conducted physiological experiments measuring female arousal. The results were unsettling. Women's bodies responded more intensely to narratives of forced seduction than to consensual, affectionate scenarios. Let that sink in. Their bodies betrayed their stated beliefs. Their nervous systems responded to danger, not safety, to surrender, not symmetry. Kinsey buried this data. Why? Because it contradicted the emerging feminist ethos of the time. Because it exposed a truth that society wasn't ready to face. Desire doesn't align with ideology. And what does this mean for you? It means everything you've been taught to avoid. The teasing, the push, pull, the emotional suspense aren't just effective tactics. They're biological imperatives. It means the nice guy doesn't finish last because he's good-hearted. He finishes last because he's predictable, because safety is admirable, but tension is intoxicating. It means that women who demand equality in the boardroom may still crave inequality in the bedroom, not because they're hypocrites, but because fantasy and fairness were never meant to coexist. And here lies the most dangerous truth of all. The key to unlocking female desire isn't about giving women what they say they want. It's about awakening what they can't consciously admit they need. But this is just the beginning. Because when society ignores these primal truths, the consequences spill out into the real world. And what we're witnessing now is the fallout, an epidemic of emotional and sexual disconnection, a rising tide of sexless, silent men withdrawing from dating, from purpose, from life. A plague of loneliness is sweeping across generations, and it's not a mystery. It's the cost of obedience, the cost of believing that kindness is always attraction, that compliance earns desire, that respectful is the same as magnetic. It's not. And Freud warned us. Let's go back to 1908. A young man named Edward, polished, educated, well-mannered, came to Freud in crisis. He was a rising lawyer, financially stable, socially admired, and utterly empty. He suffered from what was then called neurasthenia, a profound exhaustion, emotional flatness, and total loss of sexual drive. Edward had done everything right, played by every rule, yet felt nothing. He was the archetype of the good man, and Freud's analysis was brutal. Edward was not sick. He was suppressed. His instincts, his passion, his raw masculine energy, buried beneath politeness and productivity. His soul was starving because he'd never been taught how to want, how to lead, how to awaken polarity. Because society didn't want Edward to be powerful. It wanted him to be safe, and safe, Freud knew, is the death of Eros. And yet, Edward's wife loathed him. She mocked his gentleness, flirted shamelessly with other men, and eventually left him, not for a successful lawyer or polished gentleman, but for a factory worker, brutish. Dominant with a criminal record, Freud's diagnosis was as brutal as it was honest: moral castration. Edward had been taught to suppress his aggression, to trade power for politeness, dominance for decorum. In doing so, He didn't become lovable, he became invisible. Fast forward to today. The pattern hasn't changed, it's intensified. The average man under 30 is now 3 times more likely to be celibate than his father was at the same age. Dating apps have transformed courtship into a brutal algorithmic meat grinder, where the top 10% of men receive over 90% of female attention, and the ones who succeed, they're not the men who follow the rules. They're the ones who understand the dark truth Freud uncovered. Female desire doesn't care about fairness. It craves intensity. Consider the now infamous Tinder study from the University of Oslo, 2018. Women rated 85% of men as below average in attractiveness. Not just unattractive, unworthy of a second glance. Even more telling, women said they would rather share a top-tier man than settle for a loyal, average one. Why? Because monotony is the death of desire. Freud called it the boredom principle, the idea that the feminine psyche, like all human nature, is drawn not to comfort but to variability, risk, unpredictability, and in a digital age offering endless novelty and instant gratification, that impulse becomes weaponized. But it goes deeper, it gets darker. In the 1950s, psychologist John Money ran controversial studies on gender and arousal. His most shocking finding, women said they preferred kind, emotionally available men. But their bodies told a different story. Hooked up to lie detectors and biometric sensors, women were shown images of men, some gentle, some aggressive, even violent. The results: heart rates spiked, pupils dilated, skin conductance surged, only in response to dominant, dangerous men. They were aroused by what they claimed to despise. Just like Alfred Kinsey before him, Money buried the findings. Why? Because they shattered the cultural fantasy of the egalitarian relationship, where attraction is built on kindness, compatibility, and mutual respect. But look around, the evidence is everywhere. The explosion of dark romance novels where women obsess over mafia bosses, kidnappers, and morally gray anti-heroes. The meteoric rise of OnlyFans where women don't pay for affection, they pay to be degraded. Even in politics, again and again, women vote for strongmen, authoritarian leaders, and power-driven figures over gentle reformers. Freud had a name for this, the Thanatos effect, the unconscious pull toward destruction, danger, and forbidden energy. And men who fail to understand this, they're left confused, bitter, alone, scrolling endlessly through dating apps, ghosted, ignored, forgotten, not because they're unworthy, but because they believe the lie. Here's the twist. This isn't women's fault. Freud's most controversial and most misunderstood insight was this: women don't control their desires any more than men do. They are driven by the same unconscious impulses, the same biological imperatives. The only difference, society allows them the luxury of hypocrisy. A man who says he wants a submissive, feminine woman is shamed. A woman who secretly craves a dominant, promiscuous man is celebrated, as long as she lies about it in public. Want proof? Revisit the Stanford prison experiment of 1971. Everyone remembers the cruelty of the guards, the breakdown of morality under pressure, but the untold story, the female researchers and observers, those who condemned the male aggression, were overwhelmingly attracted to it, drawn to the very dominance they publicly denounced, because the unconscious doesn't care about social virtue. It only knows power, polarity, energy. Women hurled themselves at SS officers in Nazi Germany, even while publicly denouncing fascism. Freud had a blunt explanation: the erotic mind has no conscience. So, what's a man to do? Become a monster to be loved? No, the answer is game, not sleight of hand manipulation, but understanding. The men who thrive today aren't bitter about female nature, they master it. They know attraction isn't earned through worship. It's forged in tension, mystery, unpredictability. But that's only the surface. Beneath it lies a psychological war, fought not with bullets or bombs, but with words, laws, and shifting social contracts engineered to strip men of their natural instincts. The battlefield, modern dating. The casualties, millions of men who no longer recognize the rules, or worse, who have swallowed outright lies about what women really want. This isn't a random cultural drift. It's a calculated dismantling of the sexual hierarchy, one Freud predicted would culminate in mass male disillusionment. And here's the terrifying part, it's working. The Lost Chapter, Berlin, 1927. Wilhelm Reich, once Freud's protégé, conducts a series of clandestine interviews with working-class women. His goal: discover what they truly desire in a man. The findings are incendiary. Women didn't crave equality. They craved polarity. They wanted men stronger than they were, more decisive, willing to lead. One woman's confession said it all: "I don't want to be his friend. I want to be his exception." The Nazis later burned Reich's papers. Why? Because his data threatened the narrative of a uniform, controllable populace. Fast forward to now, modern men are gas-lit daily. Masculinity is toxic. Dominance equals abuse. Endless supplication wins a woman's heart. Yet empirical data shreds these slogans. A 2020 study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology reported that women were significantly more satisfied when their partners displayed assertiveness, even measured aggression, in bed. The takeaway: desire is not fair. It's primal. Safety is admirable. Tension is addictive. Polarity, not parity, ignites passion. If men ignore these truths, they drift into the gray wasteland of polite invisibility. Master them, and they reclaim agency in a dating landscape designed to disarm them. And this is only the beginning. Next, we plunge into the deeper layers of psychological warfare shaping modern relationships, and the lies women tell themselves, whether they admit it or not. Not because women enjoyed pain, but because passion requires friction. Because, as Freud wrote, desire is born from the tension between surrender and conquest. But here's where it gets sinister. The very society that condemns male dominance in speech and policy rewards it in practice. Look at Hollywood's enduring bad boy archetype. The man who breaks rules, ignores boundaries, treats women like afterthoughts, and yet always gets the girl. Look at the music charts. Female pop stars singing about toxic lovers they can't let go. Look at family courtrooms. Nice guys financially gutted in divorce, while the aloof, dominant ex walks away untouched. This isn't contradiction. It's human nature. Freud saw it coming over a century ago when he warned, civilization will demand that men neuter themselves and then wonder why women lose interest. Let me give you a real example. Michael, 32, a successful engineer, came to me last year. By every modern standard, he was perfect. Feminist, emotionally available, generous, supportive, cooked meals, remembered birthdays, encouraged her career, and then she left him, not for a richer man, not for a better man, but for a man who made her feel something. Michael's crime: he was safe, predictable, emotionally transparent. In her words, "I love you, but I'm not in love with you." And this isn't rare. It's epidemic, because it speaks to a deeper psychological reality, one Freud identified and modern science has confirmed. The hedonic treadmill humans adapt to pleasure. We normalize consistency. We crave novelty, tension, challenge. And women, biologically, are wired to seek stimulation, not endless satisfaction. Give a woman everything she asks for, and she'll lose interest, because desire doesn't feed on fulfillment. It feeds on pursuit. Still skeptical? Let's talk about dread. In the 1970s, renowned evolutionary psychologist David Buss conducted one of the largest global studies on mate retention strategies. His most controversial finding: Women were most aroused by men who were desired by other women, and least aroused by men who were too available, and this wasn't cultural. It spanned across nations, religions, and ethnic backgrounds. From tribal societies to modern urban centers, the pattern remained consistent. Women are drawn to preselected men, to men who are in demand, to men who aren't easily owned, because tension creates value. And scarcity breeds desire. This is why the nice guy finishes last, not because he's kind, but because he's predictable. He creates security, not spark. And the primal brain, especially in matters of love, doesn't crave safety. It craves survival through intensity. It was universal. From tribal villages to Wall Street boardrooms, the pattern held steady. The moment a man puts a woman above his purpose, she begins to devalue him. Freud called it the scarcity principle, the uncomfortable truth that attention only holds value when it's earned, not freely given. So what's the answer? Do you become cold, emotionally unavailable, start playing games? No, the answer is frame control. The men who thrive in this new era aren't the ones chasing, they're the ones pulling. They don't seek approval, they command presence. They understand attraction isn't logical, it's psychological. They know women say they want a good listener, but are drawn to a man who leads. They know confidence isn't arrogance. It's indifference, the quiet certainty of a man who doesn't need validation. And this is where we go nuclear, into the one Freudian secret that rewires female desire at the primal level, into the lies society feeds men to keep them obedient, soft, and sexually invisible, and into Freud's final insight, the ultimate power move that flips the script and makes her chase you. There's a force buried deep within the female psyche, an instinct so ancient, so ruthlessly primal, that once you understand it, you'll never again wonder why she picked him over you. It's not about looks, it's not about money, it's not even about status, it's about something far more dangerous, the subconscious trigger of surrender. Freud discovered it in his most controversial work. Modern psychology buried it, but the men who know, they wield it like a weapon. Let me tell you about a man history tried to erase. 1936, Hungary, a little-known psychoanalyst named Sandor Ferenczi, Freud's most radical protege, conducts a forbidden experiment. 2 recordings, 2 voices, the first, gentle, agreeable, accommodating, the second, deep, slow, unapologetically commanding. The results: 87% of women showed physical signs of arousal only to the second voice. But here's what's chilling: when asked why, they couldn't explain it. They rationalized, they lied. One woman even insisted she hated the dominant voice, while her body betrayed her with a surge of arousal. Conclusion: the female unconscious does not want to be asked. It wants to be claimed. This isn't conjecture, it's biology. Modern neuroscience confirms it. In a 2019 UCLA fMRI study, women were shown images of male faces, smiling, kind, soft-featured men. 0 activity in the brain's reward centers. Disapproving, emotionally unavailable, stoic faces. Their nucleus accumbens, the pleasure switch, lit up like a slot machine. Freud called this the defiance paradox. The more she claims to reject dominance, the more her unconscious craves to submit to it. Now, let's talk about your life. How many times have you watched a woman friends own a good man, only to spiral into obsession over the one who treats her with indifference? How many times have you seen a brilliant, successful woman crawl back to a man who offers nothing but chaos? This isn't low self-esteem. This isn't daddy issues. This is instinct. It traces back to evolution's harshest survival truth. A woman's ancestors didn't survive by partnering with soft men. They survived by aligning with power. Men who were stronger, decisive, unshakable. Men who could dominate the environment, and by extension her, and that testing, that rejection, that obsession with bad boys. It's not a flaw, it's a test of strength, because weakness, to the primal female brain, meant death. Every time she pushes you away to see if you'll stand firm, every time she picks a fight to gauge your composure, she isn't being cruel. She's filtering. Most men fail the test without ever realizing it was a test at all. The Suppressed Truth in 1951. Psychologist Erik Erikson ran a now buried study on long-term marriages. He found an unspoken hierarchy in every heterosexual relationship. The moment a man ceded his role as the psychological anchor, the woman's respect, and with it her desire, evaporated. One anonymous wife summed it up: "I begged him to open up. When he finally did, I could never look at him the same." That's the grand lie of modern dating. She says she wants equality. Her arousal feeds on asymmetry. She asks for vulnerability. Her biology craves scarcity. Freud's darkest insight: the feminine soul despises what it begs for. The solution isn't manipulation. It's polarity. Men who truly understand female desire don't control women. They invite surrender through unshakable presence. They don't demand respect. They command it simply by being immovable. 3 tactical principles. The silence strategy when she tests you. She will. The worst move is to argue or chase. Say nothing. Freud observed that a woman's mind fills silence with emotional investment. Explain less and she feels more. The decisive imperative. A 2022 study in social, psychological, and personality science showed women rate men far more attractive when those men make plans instead of asking what she wants. Decision-making equals cognitive dominance. Dominance is erotic. The reward withdrawal loop. This isn't punishment. It's natural consequence. Reward behavior that aligns with your standards: time, attention, affection. Withdraw when it doesn't. Freud noted women only value attention from men who deploy it strategically. The final secret: female desire isn't actually about her. It's about you. Make her the prize, and you lose. Live by your own code, unapologetically, and she begins the chase. That's the ultimate inversion, the grand reveal. If you're ready to wield this knowledge, type "liberate" in the comments. You were never powerless. You were simply misled. Now go, act accordingly.